Well, moving ahead with the final panel discussion on the topic, the evolving world of DEI, one step forward. To round off the discussion today, let's bring in the institutional perspective and hear how global investors are looking at changing dynamics on DEI. Introducing our moderator. Very firstly, we would like to welcome Mr. Vikram Raju, Managing Director, Head of Climate Investing, Private Credit and Equity, Morgan Stanley Investment Management. Vikram is a managing director and serves as the head of IGT platform and head of climate investing for the private credit and equity division of Morgan Stanley Investment Management. Prior to joining Morgan Stanley, IM to set up the impact investing platform in 2014, Vikram was the climate funds lead at the IFC World Bank Group. Vikram is a past chair of the Impact Council at Global Private Capital Association. Could we please have a round of applause for him? It's time to invite our panelists. We would like to welcome Ms. Anita M. George, Chief Executive Officer, Prosper ETE. Anita has been an investor backing early trends with winning partners and established a distinguished track record in sustainable investment across the globe. Her previous stint was as EVP and Deputy Head of CDPQ Global, covering all geographies outside of Canada, supporting investments in renewable energy, highway, telecom, venture fund investments in emerging markets. Can we please have a round of applause for her? Our next panelist is Ralista Rizvanoli, Partner and Head of Investment, Sarona Asset Management. Rally currently heads Sarona's Singapore office, where she's accountable for investment selection, execution, and monitoring of investments for Sarona's funds and impact mandates on behalf of third-party clients, such as government and non-profit organizations. Rally ensures that ESG and impact are embedded into the investment process. Rally is passionate about deepening the gender lens and climate risk assessment capabilities at Sarona, believing that investing with both lenses leads to better financial and sustainable outcomes. Can we please have a round of applause? Up next, we would like to welcome Renuka Ramnath, Founder, Managing Director, and CEO, Multiple Alternate Asset Management. Renuka Ramnath stands as a distinguished visionary and entrepreneur, herself who revolutionized India's private equity landscape, where few dared to venture into this uncharted territory. With innovation and entrepreneurial spirit in her DNA, she has developed and led groundbreaking tech ventures in the 1990s, including India's first payment gateway, an online bill payment platform, and a pioneering travel portal when none existed globally. She built ICICI Venture into market leader before founding Multiples, which now manages US $3 billion in assets. Can you please have a round of applause? Next up, we would like to welcome Sunil Mishra, Partner, Primary Investment, Adam Street Partners. Sunil specializes in fund selection, due diligence, negotiations, and monitoring of Asian investments, ex-China, specifically in India, Australia, Japan, Southeast Asia, and Korea. He also actively participates in all the fund investment decisions and is involved in the sourcing, screening, execution, and existing of growth and buyout co-investments. He is currently chairman of Singapore Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, SVCA, and has been a member of SVCA board since 2016. Can we please have a round of applause for him? Could we give them all a huge round of applause one more time for joining us for this final panel discussion that truly looks very promising? And without any further ado, I urge the moderator to please take it forward.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thought for a while I was going to be the only token male on the panel, but I'm glad you're here, Sunil.
Thank you.
You know, just sometimes you look at teams of private equity funds, and this is particularly true in the West, you find there are more people called Mark than there are women on the team. And so my own version of that story is when I started working here for Brook Bond, as it was then in Bangalore, my boss then and my subsequent boss at Citibank and my subsequent boss at Grinleys, all three were men called Ravi, right? So that was the level of gender diversity we had. Subsequently, I ended up working for a series of women, and that continues to this day. I worked for Mona Marquardt at Morgan Stanley, for Victoria Rock at Citibank, for Veronica John at IDFC, for you, Anita, at IFC, and then currently for Neha Markle at Morgan Stanley. So it's been a radical shift from where I began to where we are today. So with that slight aside into a personal context, I'm going to turn to this panel. You've all been introduced and you've needed no introduction. You've got great and storied history. So let's quickly kick it off with, what does DEI mean to you? Because everyone has a different definition, and why do you care? Let's go with Sunil.
No, thank you very much, Vikram. Means as a firm, it was interesting that you relate that story. As I was thinking, actually, I had a lot of female bosses as well. So as a firm, we actually have embraced this long time ago, even before it was a word and it was fashionable. And the big reason for that is, I believe that we are in the business of perspectives and opinions. And the more well-rounded and the more consensus it is, the better the decision is going to be. And I think that is somehow we actually envisioned the business. And we were very fortunate that we had some really fascinating and really intellectually capable people who were with the firm for a long period of time. And the firm is actually very, very diverse, both from a gender and also from racial perspective. And the second part on the racial was that we always believe that to be a global investor, especially backing people, which is what we do in funds, there is a lot of data, but then you actually have to back people as well. You really need to be immersed in local cultural context. And that is why, if you see, we have like over 35 nationalities, people speak more than 60 languages. So it's a very, very diverse firm, given it comes from a Midwest root in actually US, which is not a very homogeneous, not a very heterogeneous region, to be honest. So the benefits of that, it was very, very obvious to us. Clearly off late, we hear more about it. And what we have done using this new lens is how we basically are evaluating our funds. And I strongly believe if it is not reviewed, it will never be done. So, we, during our LPACs, which I think is probably the right forum to be able to drive some of these points with our GPs, and something that we are taking a lot of immediate actions on doing.
Anita, this would have not been even on the horizon when you started your career, and yet you had a storied career across the World Bank and IFC and CDPQ. What is your sort of take on this, and how it's developed and how you actually operationalize it now?
Thank you. My approach is always, why wouldn't you want, you call it what you may, but a diverse platform where you can choose the best talent and build the best culture. And why would I leave out half the world to be able to choose from? So that's a starting point. As many people in the previous panel as well as here said, the economic imperative, and one of the things that I've seen firsthand is that it truly makes a difference when you have a more diverse team, and diversity on gender as well as all the other things that you mentioned, race, and even diversity in India, something which happened accidentally, but we ended up having people from different parts of the country. And it was amazing to me that those different regional differences contributed so much to better decisions, to better discussions, to people actually pointing out risks that we would have missed.
Not to put you on the spot, but can you give us an example?
So one example that I'm very proud of is I'm on the board of First Solar, a large US manufacturing company. And the CEO in India and I, we were just talking about the plant that they were going to set up in India. And I said to him, why not aim to have at least half your workforce as women? And all credit to him, he said, let's go for it. And we did many things. We talked to placement firms who hire technical staff. We talked to colleges, engineering colleges that have graduates. And it's amazing, we got to 46%. And they've been tracking performance, and they say that compared to all their factories, both in terms of productivity and safety, adherence to safety practices, this is one of the best plants that they have, and they have plants all over the world. So, I mean, I draw the conclusion that for both the women on that shop floor as well as for the men, having that diversity has really helped to bring a different approach, a different level of really caring about how the culture as well as safety practices of the firms is.
That's great, folks, and that's a very sort of concrete, tangible example of putting this in practice. Ralitza, turning to you, you actually manage a fund with a specific gender focus. Tell us a little more about that, and so I'm taking it as a given that DEI is built into this, but there's probably more, right?
Yeah, maybe I first start a little bit about Sorona itself as a firm, and then I'll go into the fund. So we are a global firm, and so the context is slightly different than if, you know, our colleagues here who had Indian firms. Because, yeah, we need to think about being a Canadian firm making investments in emerging markets. So what kind of diversity do you really need in order to make sound investment decisions? And when we started, it was, yes, mostly, you know, Caucasian men sitting in Toronto making decisions where to allocate capital in India or in Indonesia. And quickly they realized that is not a winning formula. We need to be partnering with local partners. And that's where we decided to move away from direct to more fund-to-funds investing. So that's more 15 years back, right? So that's kind of the first realization, you need really diversity for better decision making. Kind of the next stage of thinking that our firm had is one around lived experiences. And in the end, the diversity lens comes to the fact that certain visible characteristics, being gender, being your ethnicity or race, do make a difference on how you experience life, right? And then there's other less visible characteristics like class or privilege, right? And I really like the previous panelists saying gender is one of the lenses, right? But diversity is so much more complex. And the more we peel the onion, the more we make strides into one area of diversity, the more other areas would you know, come to have attention. So I'm very happy that, you know, we've made such great progress on the gender side, but undoubtedly other lenses will be coming. Within Sorona, we have two lenses, gender and something we call visible minorities, which is a term in Canada used for people of color, which makes sense in the Canadian context. And we actually do have internal targets across employees, senior leadership, boards, and we track those and try to meet our targets. So that does focus the attention when we hire. Now, coming to your question around the funds that we manage, and we have one that is on behalf of the Australian government, Australian Development Investments. It's really their DFI, if you think of it that way. Gender lens is leading as a screen, as a way of doing investments. But we needed to first sort out our firm before we can be credible and ask our partners to do the same. So when I joined Sorona, for example, there were 5 Canadian/European men on the investment committee. Today we're 40% women, and 2 out of 3 are actually from the local emerging markets where you invest. So I think that's really, really important when you make investment decisions, and that gives us then the credibility to go to our GPs and say, you need to do the same. But with patience, right? I think we all talked about the journey, and I think we need to acknowledge where people start and where they need to be. And so with the right tools, including technical assistance, which is something we provide as part of this Gender Lens Fund, Australian Development Investments, we actually, you know, I'd like to think put our money where our mouth is by actually providing that capacity building.
I'm going to ask you about that a little more following a little later in this discussion, but turning to Renuka, you've been a pioneer in private equity in India. Your own career is, you know, a testimony to what we're talking about here in terms of the, you know, power of women in this field. What is your personal take on this? Because you've sort of done it when it wasn't a discussion point, and now it is a big, area. We're sitting here in this room when P is 5 years old. Where do you come out in this?
So, I'll give the multiples take on this rather than my personal take.
No, you have to add yours as well.
Yeah. So, okay. I don't think the multiples take and my personal take are different in any case. Multiples itself is a creation out of huge belief in the potential of people, which is why we put the P in red to begin with in the multiples logo. And DEI is an initiative to get the best out of everyone in the planet, right? I mean, it's not just about gender diversity. It's about providing access. It's about dealing with the underprivileged, solving for those problems. And of course, in terms of gender diversity as well. So our take is there are people who have the competency, who have the aspiration, and who just need that last mile confidence building in terms of it's okay to aspire and you can do it, right? And there is an environment out there which is not going to be very judgmental or judgmental about you in a biased way because you are from the female gender. And how do you therefore educate your portfolio companies in their thought process and action from top to bottom, from the board to the people right up to the grassroots level in terms of how do you build an inclusive organization. And once the purpose becomes clear, so when my colleague Nitya here, she does financial services investment. When we do an investment in Swatantra, for instance, which is a microfinance company, right? The satisfaction that everyone in multiples gets that now we have empowered so many women to bring livelihood to their families, which is going to have multi-generational benefit, right? When we incubated Vastu Affordable Housing Finance Company, we made it very clear that every house that is financed will be co-owned by the spouse. Otherwise, in India, it is very common that it is only the man who owns the house and the wife has no access to the asset or claim on the asset, in her own name. So there are various ways in which you can empower people who over several generations, because of social prejudice or social biases or social practices which have been not very thoughtful, have been relegated to somebody who cannot live their full potential. So that's what really excites us. And for us in multiples, DEI is about liberating the potential in people who have been denied.
Is there anything internally to multiples in terms of how you recruit or retain talent or reward and grow people that you feel is particularly different or informed by your own experiences historically?
So one, I would say my personal experience has been a bit different. I was born in ICICI. It was a place which was naturally gender neutral. It was only meritocracy that mattered and aspiration that mattered. Very privileged to have been in the Wagul regime where, gender was not even a question. So I would say in a way my upbringing is one of not bringing a gender bias. So in multiples, it has been one of nurturing women very naturally. I think by virtue of my being there, and I've worked with so many of my women colleagues are here, and I'm just so happy, to see them, and I've worked with them. It's a natural environment in which men and women are given an equal chance, and whoever has the aspiration is given the chance to pursue their aspiration. So it's not driven by statistics. I feel if you create an environment where you say, hey, I have to go out and hire 2 more women to get my gender balance, I would create an environment where the women candidates are seen as diversity candidates and not worthy of doing the same job as people from the other gender. So just creating an equal opportunities place which is which nurtures meritocracy, I think is good enough to build a good DEI organization.
That's a pretty good segue into the uncomfortable part of the conversation, which is where I'm going to turn to the American firm here to say, what are you encountering in terms of the conversations you're having with US LPs, or just in terms of the narrative?
So I would say that there is a headline and there is a subline, and clearly the headline is very colorful and very polarizing. But I would say it's early days. Nobody has called us and asked us why we still have a DI policy. Nobody has done that. So I think we are a global firm. We started in US and had US headquarters, but it's a really global firm in terms of investment. So we have a lot of US clients, but we have a lot of European clients, a lot of Asian clients as well. So I think we are going to hold to a pretty global bar. That's my understanding at this stage. And nobody is thinking that we need to be doing this for a short term. As I mentioned, I've been with the firm for 18 years, and maybe this word is a little bit more popular recently. We were always a very big disciple of that, because we believed in 2-3 things. We need to fundamentally change the society, because we came from venture heritage. We wanted to do big and change the world, and that kind of continues. We do not invest at the large end of the market. Financial engineering is not, which is in our DNA as well. So I don't think we are trying to toe a policy line, and today it is not really relevant, so we're not going to do it. To be honest, when we first put in place our own ESG committee and ESG initiative, and I was part of that, many of our US clients, which is 50-60% of our client base, had no interest and no drive to even ask those questions. Much of that was driven by our European clients. But we felt that we are at a stage where our firm is global, and we are seeing more and more what I call the negative cost of not being compliant. I think that was kind of the biggest thing for us, that if your business was a higher quality business from a sustainability perspective, from a health and safety, and from many other, I would say, business process perspective, there was a higher multiple you could get at exit. It is pretty well established. But also, if you had any failures, your stock price would probably be half, and your purchase valuation would be half as well. So we saw that metric difference in how to build sustainable businesses, which are kind of using these parameters and practices to really imbibe, rather than just to pay lip service to it. So that's how the firm was designed, and I think we are doing a good job. I think there is more to do, but clearly that's where we sit. So to your point, haven't heard anything, but we will see. I saw a lot of really large MNCs change their D&I policy, so don't want to brush it away as well. And I think we are trying to be very global.
Try to get the Canadian perspective, and I know you talked about how it's getting less Canadian centric, but even so.
Well, no doubt what's happening is difficult. I think with the closure of USAID, DFC is really pulling out. The European budgets are getting redirected to defense spending, so that means there's less for ODA, which is official development assistance. So I think emerging markets will really start feeling it, particularly those GPs that are accustomed to getting funding from DFI. So there will be a change. But that might open the doors for other kind of capital, right? So I think it's a real test as to whether we truly are standing by these principles. And yeah, there will need to be a replacement somehow found, because these were huge contributors to the cause and to emerging markets. And so definitely a change and a shift will be happening. I think us as a firm, we have a little bit less exposure to US investors, but what we are hearing from, for example, European DFIs is indeed on the gender side, let's be more muted, but really emphasize how investing through such propositions in emerging markets brings the European business interest. So it's all about either Europe first, America first, Canada first, right? So it's strange because we're kind of still doing the same things, but we just need to be repackaging them slightly differently. And there's so many elections that are coming up that I kid you not, there's different languages being prepared for the same thing depending on which party would win. So it's just, we just keep doing what we always do. We just might call it slightly differently.
Anita, so trying to put a more positive spin on this, what do you think we operate in a very different context in India, as was mentioned, Europe is a very different entity as well. So are there things happening here that can actually be good lessons to export to the rest of the private equity community globally?
So I think India, in many ways, kind of has both parts of the equation in that you have women who've faced many challenges at all levels. I work with the Self-Employed Women's Association on one of their funds. And what I see from the members of the Self-Employed Women's Association, who are among the poorest from their respective states, they, once empowered, are really bold. And it changes not just their economic situation, but their social, their acceptance in the community, their ability to influence decisions in the community. Where I get more worried, to be honest with you, is corporate women, women in funds, women in the so-called educated elite world. There's still trepidation, there's still really serious challenges. And something that Renuka mentioned resonates with me, which is, in many ways, it depends on leadership. And whether you call it DEI or something else, or rejig the language, if you have leaders who are smart and bold, they will continue to make that difference. Another very important thing is, I think, incentives. And that's very linked to the leadership. Because if leaders reward those who are making the right decisions and getting the best people, regardless of race or gender, the message goes through very fast and very quick. And that I've seen that in different organizations, whether the multilateral world, the private sector world, when I worked in Siemens, for example, or the pension fund world in Canada. And one story I will share is that, and this links to the ESG, CDPQ was one of the first pension funds in Canada to come out with targets on emission reduction and green investments. The first year we did that, it was great. There was a lot of press. But the culture in the organization, the discussions at the investment committees pretty much stayed the same. However, when the CEO leadership, again, changed the incentive system where the bonuses for each of us was linked to how we performed on those targets, even the youngest person in the team was concerned about what we were investing in. And it just aligned everybody so squarely. So one thing that I've seen in India is there's a huge opportunity because, and it struck me again and again because I operate in these two worlds, the corporate world as well as women at the real grassroots level. And I think you have to be very purposeful and push for change in every opportunity that one has, whether it's at the corporate or in other ways, even with like making sure that the person who works in your house has a bank account. That can change a person's life. So I think for me, the example that India can bring to the rest of the world is, again, I'll go to what Renuka was saying, giving a voice to people who haven't had one. And in many cases, it's not just people at the lower strata of income, but even women and other minorities at the highest levels of society who, because of tradition and biases, have not had that voice. So how do you bring out that voice? That's something I think India could really be a role model for the rest of the world.
Excellent. We'll take a quick time check and see if there are any questions from the audience at
Yeah,
this
may
point.
I add one thing, actually,
Please.
so I cover a lot of other regions in Asia as well. And actually, I think India already has more of, female general partners, Renuka is right here, than many other regions, actually. So I think we are already leading the charge. And, we are hoping that, we'll see more in other markets as well. As I was mentioning, we have started with many firms at the LPAC level, asking, how are they kind of moving that, and they're all starting at the earlier stages of the firm. It takes time for people to get to the senior levels, but clearly that is something that, we are already up there.
That's great. So I'm going to quickly summarize what I'm taking from this discussion, but let's see if there are questions that people have for this audience. Ask now or, very quickly. So one there, please, the lady at the back.
So I'll just repeat it that, each of you has spoken about how this has been a journey over 15 years, 20 years. We have got to where we are today. It seems unfair that we need to take another 15 years, 20 years to get to some other milestone. What is it that we can do to hasten this change? Any thoughts?
Who wants to go first?
I just think that it is communication. Basically, more and more women, if we are talking about diversity, there are also other, underprivileged boys can also feel that they cannot become engineers or they cannot work for an MNC or whatever, right? There are various ways in which we can take a cut on how do you build a more inclusive society. I think the starting point is a lot of communication around newer role models, right? Where people with diverse backgrounds have made it very successful. And I'll tell you, when Business Today started this, what was that? 25 women leaders of India or something, and they would name me as well. I would be so embarrassed to go and take that award, and I would worry about if I didn't show up in that function, whether it'll backfire on my career. And why do these magazines have to do all of that? And it took me several years to understand that I am so privileged to work in an organization which gave me all this opportunity. Unless you showcase women who have gone out there and conquered, they have kind of pioneered on uncharted waters and they made themselves successful, other women will not have the confidence to take those initial steps. So it took, even for a person like me, a long time to understand why this kind of communication is very important. Again, it's not about top corporate leaders. At every strata of society, in every vocation, how can we propagate more and send a message to the masses at large that it's okay to aspire and it is good to be empowered, right? And once that happens, the ripple effect will follow. And I'm dead against setting statistical driven approaches or rule-based approaches or legislation-based approaches, because they tend to give very good short-term results and in the long term are very disruptive. And in fact, they reset you back to a worse position than where you started. It is better to go with a very good communication, education, role modeling, and stuff like that, which are sustainable, even if it takes slightly longer.
Actually, I completely agree with Renuka. I thought this question will come to me, so I prepared for it. But I think, the role model is probably the right way of looking at it. And it's a very funny incident. And I was watching this movie on plane. And today we kind of take it for granted that, a lot of television anchors are actually, females. But there was a time, not too long ago, where it was completely restricted for them. And, you needed one, and then after that you have really a long stream of them.
Did you watch Anchorman?
Yes.
Maybe I'll go next. So I fully agree. We shouldn't wait another 15 years for more progress. But hopefully the fact that DEI and gender is much more mainstream now than it has ever been, I think, should speed things up. A few things that we're doing as an LP. So every year we do measure where our GPs are. We particularly care about women in leadership, so especially on investment committees or women on the boards of the companies. Those are the two metrics, and we have a global portfolio of GPs, so that's across emerging markets globally. Those are consistently the two metrics that the results are not there yet. Employees, absolutely, 40–50% is there. At both fund manager and portfolio company level. So I think we still have a long way to go. And yeah, every year we measure it, and what we do is we benchmark their performance against the 2X challenge benchmarks, as well as the median that we see in our own portfolio. So this kind of way, I guess, it's not really naming and shaming, but for those that underperform, it is a little bit. And for those that overperform, gives them that confidence, right? So that's something very, very concrete. I know it's kind of reductive and it's just numbers, but we've kind of picked those two. And I think if every organization that says they care about those things, really focusing on even one thing, pick one thing that you focus on, but you just be a squeaky wheel about it over and over and over again until it sticks in your partner's minds that, hey, our LP really cares about this. Should we think about it? How do we improve it? And the other thing we're doing is really launching products that aim to fill in these gaps. So right now we're launching two products. One is to address the lack of climate funds in Southeast Asia. The other is female fund managers in Asia. I think India on both accounts, by the way, is top performer, but it's really not the case in the rest of the region. Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines have really a long way to go. And so our role, we see it as a fund of funds, is, okay, the next products we try to raise are exactly to tackle those challenges.
So I'm going to disagree with all my panelists in answering your question. What I have learned is that you have to be purposeful. So since I come from the infrastructure sector, every team that I joined, I was one among maybe two people or three. And it took a lot of really being a pain in the neck and pushing and saying we need to have more diversity, more inclusiveness. Standard response was, oh, there are no women in this sector. So really going out of your way, even placement firms would turn around and I would tell them that I'll hire you 3 times more if you can bring me a good list of women candidates or diverse candidates. They would sort of, the instantaneous reaction would be, no, it can't be done. But, you know, in just the past 30 years of experience in every single job, that equation has changed. And it's not so much the numbers, but it's really the change it brings when you have critical mass. So one thing, it's great for the culture and the organization, but also for the diverse candidates to know that there are others like you who are in the group where you're not shut out of, you know, coffee machine conversations or even bathroom conversations. I still remember like feeling so jealous of my male colleagues because the boss was always a man and they would follow him to the bathroom. And just simple things like that, when you have enough women at all levels, it makes a difference. So to answer your question, my hope is that all this hoo-ha about DEI in the US is not going to take away from that really concerted, how can I say, deliberate effort to make our workplaces more reflective of our society.
Anita, I actually completely agree with you about having the critical mass. I think in ICICI, we all survived because we had critical mass. It was okay to cry. It was when my child fell off the bed for the first time when he was 3 months old, and it was so difficult for me to leave him and take the train and go to office, I went crying. And it was okay because you had other male colleagues, and probably if I had only female colleagues, if I had only male, I would have probably kept my emotion to myself, right? So there are things that happen on an everyday basis, and if you feel secure and safe to be just yourself and pour your emotions, it certainly is very helpful in longevity. But I just want to share one story. So we work with an event management company called Stage Art Life, right, Pratibha? Yeah. So this is started by a lady called Shaheen. So this is event management. So they work till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. There is no time. And she is a 24/7 woman. We met her probably 15 years back, and since then we gave all our events, and today she conducts events for every financial services firm in this country. I don't know when she sleeps, when she pays attention to her son. But the bigger story is every member of her team is a woman. Can you imagine an industry like event management where you're dealing with workers who are putting up this panel, pinning up the stage at odd hours of day and night, and you have only a woman team? What is the story here? From what I have seen in 40 years in India, women who have deep determination and aspiration always make it. It is just that the stock of women who have that aspiration is a small percentage. And why is that so? Because of social conditioning, right? When you grow up in a family where you are continuously told you have to just get married and raise children, your motivation diminishes. You have no role models in the family. You are constantly growing up with the feeling that my husband is not going to let me, kind of go to work. I'm going to school because it's a time pass I do till I reach the age of 18. Then that conditioning is what really prevails. So right from your basic education, how do you change the stories in your primary school and secondary school books? How do you educate people at home? How do you educate parents to raise their male and female child with equal opportunities? And if, in fact, if you have a daughter who is brighter than your son, and if you have limited resources, please invest in the daughter, and not invest in the son. I think these kind of social changes are required for us to get the aspiration level high. Once the aspiration level is high, women find their way. We don't need to do anything.
I think we're time up. So on that very inspirational note, I think it's time to wrap this. The panel will be here. You can ask any questions and follow up over the reception. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Could we give them a huge round of applause for the final panel? Thank you to each one of you for joining us and for bringing a change. May I request Nupur to please come up on the stage and hand over the giveaways. The presents are made by women entrepreneurs, and we are giving the platform to them to recognize the same for their contributions.